3 decades ago, a shadowy organization conducted experiments on humans using a device known as the Berserk Wheel. This led to the creation of monstrous beings called players, who were forced to battle each other for the amusement of wealthy spectators. These players, devoid of human consciousness, acted purely on primal instincts, engaging in relentless violence. However, one day, the players suddenly developed self-awareness. They turned on their captors, slaughtering both the researchers and spectators. In the chaos that ensued, Dr. Goro managed to escape, carrying a newly born player with him. A decade passed swiftly, and Goro, along with the player he named Jin, found refuge in the slums. Goro instilled in Jin a strong sense of justice, urging him to uphold it no matter the situation. One day, a woman named Akemi, being pursued by a gang, found herself cornered in an alley. Jin appeared on a nearby wall and offered to help her for a fee of 10,000 yuan. Akemi, desperate, agreed, and Jin immediately sprang into action. Jin effortlessly incapacitated one thug and sent the others flying with a single punch, displaying a power far beyond that of an ordinary boy. After dealing with the attackers, Jin was about to demand payment from Akemi when his close friends, siblings Kuga and Konoha, arrived. Kuga, who believed that good deeds should be done without expecting anything in return, quickly took Jin away. The 3 friends were very close and often worked together to fight for justice. Despite this, Akemi sought out Jin later that evening, gave him the money, and offered to treat him to a meal as thanks. Returning home that night, Jin was met with a horrifying scene. Bodies scattered around, and his grandfather Goro lying in a pool of blood. In their final moments together, Goro passed away, leaving Jin devastated. Jin tried to find a doctor, but without money, he was turned away. Feeling hopeless, Jin reached out to his friend Kuga, but his calls went unanswered. At the same time, Kuga's father was reprimanding him and Konoha, warning them not to associate with homeless orphans like Jin to uphold the honor of the Amagi family. In his despair, Jin remembered Akemi and sought her out. Akemi, far from turning him away, kindly took Jin to the hospital and the police station to arrange the necessary procedures for Goro's death. Afterward, she brought Jin to her home. As they spent more time together, Akemi began to see Jin as her own child, recalling her own missing child. Learning that Jin had no parents and had been raised solely by his grandfather, deepened Akemi's compassion for him. Meanwhile, on the streets, a couple was discussing a recent series of murders, unaware of a lurking danger. As Akemi and Jin grew closer, she started treating him like her own son. Meanwhile, the real Gulliver is in the midst of another daring adventure. Passionate about collecting rare and valuable objects, Gulliver is busy stealing a priceless crown from a heavily guarded palace. Despite being threatened by the palace guards, Gulliver remains unfazed. He bids the guards a cheeky farewell before leaping out of a broken window and diving into the sea below. He swims back to his ship, where he adds the crown to his growing collection of treasures. Just as he begins to relax, a small boat approaches his ship, carrying a messenger sent by an old friend from Lilliput. The messenger introduces himself and hands Gulliver a letter detailing the dire situation in Lilliput. Without a moment's hesitation, Gulliver sets sail for the city. Upon arriving at Lilliput, Gulliver is greeted by a crowd of stunned citizens. Expecting a giant, they are shocked to see a man of ordinary size. Confusion ripples through the crowd, and the king steps forward, demanding to know where the towering hero of the prophecy is. Gulliver, bewildered, introduces himself and reminds them that he is the same Gulliver who once saved their city. But the king, fueled by the exaggerated tales of their history books, refuses to believe him. He orders Gulliver to prove his identity in a court of law. The courtroom scene is chaotic and absurd. The king, who insists on playing all the roles in court, judge, lawyer, and jury, by rapidly changing costumes, is determined to convict Gulliver. Gulliver, frustrated by the farcical trial, tries to reason with the king, explaining that he has never been a giant and that his heroism lies in his actions, not his size. But the king's mind is made up. He suggests that Gulliver be executed for deceiving the people. In the midst of the trial, a young girl named Marcy steps forward to defend Gulliver. She spins a story that Gulliver, though born into a family of giants, was struck by a mysterious illness as a child that stunted his growth, leaving him the size of an ordinary man. Gulliver, seeing an opportunity, plays along with Marcy's tale, hoping to gain the court's sympathy. However, Marcy's defense only delays the inevitable. The king postpones the execution until the following day. Desperate to avoid execution, Gulliver begs for mercy, offering all his wealth in exchange for his life. But the citizens, misled by the prophecy, are adamant about seeing him punished. Gulliver is thrown into prison, accompanied by his loyal pet mouse, Squeak. The prison guards mock Gulliver's small size and revel in the irony of their giant hero being no bigger than any of them. Meanwhile, the threat from Blefuscu grows more ominous. General Lisimo, the cunning and ruthless leader of Blefuscu's army, is informed by his spies that Gulliver has returned to Lilliput. Upon hearing that Gulliver is not the giant described in the legends, Lisimo is emboldened and hastens his plans to invade, believing that victory will be easily achieved. Back in prison, Gulliver, frustrated and helpless, sends Squeak to find a way out. But Squeak, easily distracted, stumbles upon a hidden stash of cheese and forgets his mission entirely. Gulliver, realizing that Squeak will not be returning anytime soon, attempts to break out of his cell on his own. Unfortunately, his efforts only result in him breaking his finger. Just as Gulliver is beginning to lose hope, the king pays him a visit. Gulliver, ever the quick thinker, begins to flatter the king, praising his intelligence and multitasking abilities, all in a bid to manipulate him. He even goes so far as to compliment the filthy prison cell, calling it a luxurious apartment. The king, flattered and intrigued, agrees to swap places with Gulliver, giving him the keys to the dungeon. As Gulliver searches for a Squeak, he encounters Marcy once again. She reveals that she delayed the execution to give Gulliver time to escape, and offers to help him find a hidden exit. Despite his initial distrust, Gulliver eventually agrees to accept her help. Together, they find a secret passage out of the dungeon, but their freedom is short-lived. The king quickly realizes he has been duped and orders a manhunt for Gulliver. As they flee through the city, Gulliver and Marcy reach the harbour, where they hope to find refuge on Gulliver's ship. But the harbour is heavily guarded, and escape seems impossible. Marcy then reveals that she knows the whereabouts of Gulliver's old friend Freelock, who may hold the key to understanding the strange changes in Lilliput. Gulliver is shocked when they find Freelock, now an old man, living in a secluded part of the city. Marcy explains that Lilliput has been subjected to a bizarre invention called the Year Day, a day where an entire year passes within 24 hours. This is why, Despite only a year having passed in Gulliver's world, 40 years have gone by in Lilliput. The previous king had initiated this strange system in an attempt to hasten Gulliver's promised return, not realizing the chaos it would cause. Freelock, once Gulliver's closest ally, has been forced to conform to the king's delusions to protect his daughter, Marcy. He explains that he had no choice but to go along with the king's insistence that Gulliver was a giant, even though he knew the truth. Gulliver, deeply moved by Freelock's sacrifice, vows to set things right. However, before they can put their plan into action, the royal guards burst in and arrest Gulliver and Marcy. They are taken to the town square, where the king, now dressed in an absurd executioner's costume, prepares to carry out the sentence. But the execution is interrupted by the arrival of envoys from Blefuscu, demanding Lilliput's immediate surrender. The king, desperate to avoid humiliation, turns to Gulliver for help, promising to clear his name if he can save the city from invasion. Gulliver agrees, but only if the king officially acknowledges him as the true hero and releases his friends. Reluctantly, the king agrees. The citizens of Lilliput, still skeptical, demand that Gulliver perform miraculous feats to prove himself. Gulliver, with Freelock's help, manages to rebuild the city's defenses and restore the water supply, earning the trust and admiration of the people. He then delivers an inspiring speech, reminding the citizens that true heroism is not about physical size, but about courage, unity, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. As Blefuscu's army approaches, Gulliver devises a cunning plan to outwit General Lisimo. He challenges the general to a duel, promising that the winner will claim Lilliput. Lisimo, arrogant and dismissive of Gulliver's small stature, accepts the challenge. The duel takes place the next morning. Gulliver, using his intelligence and the unpredictable weather caused by the year day, manages to outmaneuver Lisimo. Despite the general's initial advantage, Gulliver's clever tactics and use of the environment eventually lead to Lisimo's defeat. With the threat from Blefuscu eliminated, the citizens of Lilliput celebrate their victory. The king tries to take credit for the triumph, but the people see through his deceit. They demand a new leader, and Gulliver nominates Freelock, who promises to abolish the year day and restore normalcy to Lilliput. Finally, with peace restored and his name cleared, Gulliver bids farewell to Lilliput. As he sails away, he reflects on the importance of staying true to oneself and the power of humility. The citizens of Lilliput, now wiser and more united, wave goodbye to their hero, knowing that they no longer need to rely on myths and legends to protect them.